There, I think we're live now. Me and my technical difficulties, but yes, I think we're live now. We're going to wait just a little bit for people to jump on with us. It shouldn't take them too long. Start loading some comments and see if everybody's online with us. So I was approached about doing this live class via Facebook or on Instagram. I chose Facebook because that's where people usually find me. And got some information about the group that's doing it. And this whole thing is about supporting artists and supporting each other. And I thought it was such a cool idea that I agreed to do it. They do have a charity that is part of this whole artists program, and it's called Mothers of the Favela. And this is an organization that during this whole crisis is helping the mothers in some areas of Brazil and in South America that are really struggling during this COVID crisis. And it's absolutely a brilliant idea. So I've got the website, it's up on the screen right now. Mars, and I think I've spelled it wrong. Oh my goodness. But I'll check that and get it fixed. But the organization has a place where you can make donations to support mothers. 49% of the families living in favelas in Brazil and in South America, 49% of them rely on their mothers for their family income. That's extraordinary. And they're already living in the poorest parts of the country. And with all of this crisis going on, now their incomes are almost non-existent. So this organization has come up with a fantastic way to help support them. Through your donations, if you decide to make a donation, I'll give you a little tip. The smallest donation on their group that you can select, I mean, you can select to donate any amount you want, but they do have specific little gifts that you can donate. The smallest one is 30 Brazilian real. One Brazilian real is equivalent to 20 cents US. That's nothing. So 30 real is $6. That's it. $6. That's less than most of us spend at Starbucks in a week. So if you're of a mind, please go check out their website and have a look if you feel like helping. If you prefer to keep your donation dollars inside your own country, I applaud that as well. I would direct you to local food banks. They could really use your support as well. So we've got a whole bunch of people joining us. Luciana Goya, hola. Maria Frietas, buena notte. Mira Montiero, nice to see you, dear. Milena, sorry, nice to see you too. Oh my goodness, there's all kinds of you joining me today. That's fantastic. The project that we're going to work on is called A Calm Sea. It's a really easy mixed media project. It's very simple, and it doesn't use a whole lot of product or a lot of equipment. So it makes for a fun project that we can bang out fairly easy and pretty quickly. So what I've done is I prepared everything in advance so that we can go through this step by step by step. I'll show you the image. This is the piece we're working on. This is called A Calm Sea. It is some really basic mixed media technique. We're working with matte medium. We're working with some gesso, some fluid acrylic, some Americana acrylic, and some paper. So it's a pretty simple project, and it's quite pretty, and it's really nice for those of you that have a nautical theme. But there's some really fun techniques involved in this. So let me get that picture. Where am I? There I am. I lost myself for a second. So we're going to start working on this. This is a really, really simple project. Let me switch to the other camera so that you can see what we're doing. This is it. So initially, the original piece is actually done on this. This is a wood cradle, an artist's cradle. It's got a smooth Baltic birch. The base coat is a light buttermilk, 1 or 2 coats. It doesn't even have to be perfect, just enough to give you a reasonably uniform surface. So I have my base coat. This is done on watercolor paper. And we're going to apply some of this. This is a Tim Holtz ideology papers. These are fantastic. This roll has tons of paper on it. You can do all kinds of projects with it. It's a little transparent when you get it wet. You can see my fingers right through it. And so you can put it over top of a base coat, and it's going to allow some of that base color to show through. And it really does create a nice look. So we're going to start by putting on this paper. And to do that, we're going to use some matte medium. This is DecoArt's DecoArt Media matte medium. This stuff is great because it dries perfectly matte, has this great flat finish. It's water-based, dries very quickly. So you're going to put a generous coat of this over your painted surface. Really quick, it's easy to work with. Goes on nice and smooth. Just remember to clean your brush thoroughly when you're done with it. You don't want this to dry in there. So now I like to drag this till it catches. Just like that. And then press it into place. Like so. Now, if you have a brayer, by all means use it. Firmly seat that paper right into that matte medium, like so. If you get any of the matte medium on your brayer, just wash it off with a little warm water. There we go. So it's nice and tight to the surface. You give this just a few minutes to dry, and then apply a second coat of the matte medium right over top of it. So that when it's nice and dry, it is tight to the surface. You don't have any bubbles or blisters. You can see how nicely that goes on. It adheres beautifully. The matte medium is fantastic for this stuff. So it goes on really, really nice, and that matte medium will dry crystal clear and dead flat. So you're not going to have any reflection or any shiny spots anywhere. It's really great for that. So that brings us to our next step. In order to create that background texture that we have in there, you need to tape off your surface. So I've taken a little painter's tape and gone around this so that I have a nice clean edge. And the next product we work with is the DecoArt Gesso. Now, I love this stuff for a couple of reasons. One, it's super creamy. It's also super thick. Like, you can't even shake it out of the jar. So with a nice wide palette knife, you're going to pick up a little of that thick gesso. Look how creamy that is. Now we're going to put just a few little patches of this. I'm using the flat of the palette knife to put it on with, so I just want some loose little scattered texture on this surface, just like that. Now remember, in the image we have some rocks down at the bottom that lighthouse is going to sit on, so we're going to put a little thicker application down here and a little sketchy texture here and there. This is just going to catch some of that color in interesting ways and just create some nifty texture in the background. So that's it. You really don't have to work hard to get that. We just want some irregular areas. We want some of that imagery in the paper to show through. I like that there's these big numbers, and then there's these stamped elements, and vertical and horizontal, and postage stamps. There's a variety of different things in this background to keep it interesting. So we then take this and set it aside to dry. It usually dries in about 3 to 5 minutes. It doesn't take very long, and it doesn't dry with cracks in it, which I really like. This gesso dries really nice and retains the shape that you put it in, so you can use this over stencils or for a variety of things without worrying about getting any cracking. So we're going to set this one aside to dry, and it'll probably take about 5 minutes, and we will move on to the next step. So here we have it. This one, our gesso is nice and dry. So our next step is to start adding some color, and the first color on our list is cobalt teal hue. I love these fluid acrylics. These have such great pigmentation, but really nice transparency. So let's grab an angle brush. You don't need to have any special mediums or anything for this. Just good old-fashioned water will do the trick. So we're going to just pity-pat a little of that cobalt teal hue right over the background. Over top of that gesso, over top of the paper. Neatness doesn't count and perfection is to be avoided at all costs. Now, when I come to about here, which according to the line drawing is about where the top of the lighthouse will be, in the middle here, I'm going to leave an open space. And I'm just going to continue around it. I like keeping the darker value to the outside edge. And if it starts to look a little too choppy or something, just pick up a little more water and throw some of that on. It'll take care of those brush marks and those things. So, a little more color. Don't be shy with it. If you don't find that it's dark enough for you, if you'd like to see it a little brighter, by all means, put some more on. They dry very quickly. They close up quick, so you'll be able to putz a little with it. I like putzing with it. This cobalt teal hue is probably a little less opaque than you're used to if you're working with traditional acrylics. The fluid acrylics are very transparent, which in a case like this works in our favor because we can still see all of that wonderful interest in those textures that we've created in the background. If I was using a more opaque paint, a lot of that would disappear or get buried. And in a case like this, we want to keep all of those elements. So I've got lots of cobalt teal in there. I really like how this is looking. Now comes to that blank spot that we were talking about. I like to have a little bit of light in the background. It keeps things from getting too cold, especially when you're working with a lot of blues like we are here. I'm using a color called diarylide yellow. This is really, really vibrant yellow, and it will pop on this background. So I'm picking up just a small amount of it, and you're going to see just how vibrant this yellow is. Look at that. It just jumps. So work it in till it overlaps that blue, and you're going to get a little greenish cast like that, which is kind of pretty. And surprisingly, when you do this, it doesn't look like a perfect circle. It just gives you that nice soft blend between those two colors. And it still keeps all of those wonderful little textures and images in the paper showing through. So now we have this great texture. We need to deepen this just a little bit, and only in a few areas. So I'm going to jump in with a little bit of Prussian blue. And the same process, I'm going to pick up just a little on my brush with a little bit of water, and I'm going to pull some of that Prussian in the corners, you know, those areas where I want a little darker tone. So I'm just pity-patting a little bit into those corners, maybe along some edges, just to give it a little more depth. I love Prussian blue. Now, when I was prepping this afternoon, I discovered that I didn't have any Prussian blue in the media acrylic. All I had was the Prussian blue in the regular Deckwort Americana. I did, however, find a bottle of the phthalo turquoise in the media line, and I want to show you the difference. The phthalo turquoise is a really vibrant blue, and it actually, I think it works really well in this, but look at that. It just pops. Wherever that goes, that blue just resonates. This is a really great blue. So if you don't have any Prussian blue, or you're not fond of that more grayed tone, then grab some of that phthalo turquoise, because that's just an awesome color. You can see the sea in this. This is a great color for this. So we've got all of our cobalt teal in the background. We've got that diarylide yellow for that heat, that sort of sunrise thing in there. We have all of the Prussian blue and that phthalo turquoise in there as well. So we're ready to start adding in some clouds. And this is where you're going to get your hands dirty. My mother used to say that if you don't get dirty, you didn't have fun. So I'm going to set this one aside to dry, and we'll move on to our next board. So here we have one. It's nice and dry. It's ready to work. So I'm going to put a little bit of warm white on my palette. This one is easy peasy. And I have some warm white on my fingers. Now, if you look at the line drawing for this piece, you'll notice that I've drawn some clouds in. That's just for placement. You don't have to make them nice and perfect. In fact, it's more interesting if they're not. So I like to use my fingers to put in these clouds, because as the paint runs out, you get that white line for the top of the cloud. And then the paint runs out, so you get some interesting effects, and you don't ever have to shade these clouds because they just sort of happen. And with that tape in place, you can go right off the page. So how fun is that? So this is an easy way to do a really great textured background, lots of interest. And then you let that white run out. Do you see where it's run out along here into that yellow? A little bit of the yellow peeking through behind the clouds. Easy peasy. So you can put in as few or as many clouds as you want. I kind of like that soft, ethereal look that you get with the white going over top of these colors. So there we go. Now, down here at the bottom, we have a spot for the lighthouse. And so we only need about an inch or so down here. So I'm going to take a little asphaltum. This is anybody that paints with me knows that this is one of my favorite colors. I use asphaltum all the time and for so many different things. So I have a little asphaltum on my brush, and I'm going to create some stones just by floating a little asphaltum along like this, just to create that sort of rocky look back here, and then put a little wash of that like that. Again, neatness doesn't count. Perfection is to be avoided at all costs. We're not looking for ideals here. We just keep them loose, keep them fun. Put a little shading of asphaltum in a few places. I like it. It just subdues things. It also helps pop some of that texture that we have in the background. All of that texture that kind of gets hidden a little bit with just a wash of asphaltum over top of it. And I'll do the same thing across the top, just to age that a little bit. Easy. So this next step is pretty simple. You're going to trace and transfer your line drawing onto your surface, just using some traditional graphite. It'll transfer fairly easily. Just make sure that the paint is really dry before you move on to that next step. And then we're going to talk about the base coats. So I've got my piece already base coated. It's already prepped, so we'll discuss that. I'll set this aside to dry. And here is my prepped piece. All of my base coats are in place. I have base coated the roof of the lighthouse with primary magenta, which is this gorgeous red in the media line. But honestly, any shade of red that you like will work just fine. The stripes in the lighthouse are based with carbon black, and the opposing stripes are based with warm white. I tend to stay away from titanium white. Titanium white tends to be far too bright, and it's a little cold, so I always tend to lean towards a warm white. I like how it marries itself well to so many other colors. So warm white for the alternating stripes. Now, in the center of this light in the lighthouse, I usually put a base of white down first, or a little bit of gesso, and then I'll go over it with a little diarylide yellow. And you notice that these two colors are right across from each other, this diarylide that we used here, and then this diarylide we use here. Then all of the butterflies, these little fellows up here, are all based with carbon black. It's just a simple base coat. There's no highlights to add to it. There's no elaborate detailing to add to it. These fellows are done just with the carbon black. So next, we're going to start adding some of the detail to this lighthouse, and we're going to start with the roof of that. I'm going to use a rigger and a little bit of warm white, and I'm going to put just a small highlight. Let's pull this in so you can see it. There's a small highlight on the roof of that lighthouse. So it's just done with a liner brush, something simple. Don't overdo it. It doesn't need it. I've got a nice fine liner here, and I have a nice angle. So the liner I'm going to use to add some of the details around the top of this lighthouse, but first we need to add a little bit of heat, a little more heat to the light in the lighthouse. So I'm going to do that with a small float of that primary magenta, and I'm going to put it on the opposing side under here, and it will give you sort of an orange cast to that light. Keep it simple. Now for the body of the lighthouse, I'm going to put a simple shadow. This is just some asphaltum. This is where that color comes in, you know, that muddy brown that I use for everything. I'm going to put a shadow up the back side of that lighthouse, just like this. And that's going to give us a nice shading right there. The highlight on the base of this lighthouse is done with a liner brush. And it's just a fine line of white on the black. Obviously the white on the white isn't going to stand out, so we put it on the black. I'm going to do this for each of the rungs on this lighthouse. And now I'm going to go into that carbon black and add a couple of little details to just to put those rungs in on the lighthouse. I'm just using a little bit of carbon black, like so. And come across the bottom. Now, I like this. Just pulling a couple of little lines from the outside edge and across, like so. Now, we need a little shadow on the back of that roof, right here. And you can do that with asphaltum or a little bit of carbon black. I'm using a little carbon black just to give it a little shading. And I'm going to come in along the base. I want to jump up some of these rocks a bit and put a shadow at the base of that lighthouse, just to accentuate some of these rocks. Now I'm going to give that a second to dry. Oh, Marcio Garcia, I miss you too, love. So we've got this in here. Now, one of the things I use for a lot of my mixed media is this Uniball Signo. It's a DX and it's a 0.38. It's a very, very fine pen. It has a really great ink in it, but the biggest benefit is that it has a stainless steel ball. It's not a plastic ball or a Teflon ball, it is a stainless steel one. And it is ideal for this type of thing. So I can do all sorts of interesting little details with it. And I like putting sort of a sketchy line on the whites, like so. It just creates a little softer look in the end. So a little sketchy bit on the whites. Nothing too, it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, it looks better if it's not. Just a little line like so. And you can put it wherever. I use this when I'm doing, the edges of petals and flowers and whatnot. It just gives the end result a slightly softer look. And it looks a little less perfect. I'm resistant to the idea of perfection. So if you can get your hands on one of these, they're fantastic for all sorts of things. I use them for all of my line drawings. I use them for a variety of things. So one or two just little final details. I need a black stamp pad. I'm going to show you how to use this black stamp pad to do this edge. It works really, really well. And I like the end result. So ordinarily I paint the edges with a little bit of carbon black or lamp black just to make them nice and dark, but I like finishing the edges of this with a stamp pad. So you just scuff the edges slightly like so with the stamp pad. And you can see it gives it a nice crisp finish all the way around. And you can cut into corners and you can do some fun stuff with it. Makes it look a little more finished. Just like that. Easy peasy. So I really like how that looks. It just finishes it nicely for me. So we have 2 more steps to do. One of my favorites, of course, I can't paint anything without using a stencil of some sort. So I have this really great postage stencil that I really like for this particular piece. I think it works really well. It's got a nice canceled stamp on it. And I really like how this looks. So I don't want to have the whole thing on there. I just want to have a little bit of it. And I like how it sort of runs off the page a little bit. So this is a little trick that I use. If you try to do a stencil when it's sitting off like this, it never sits flat and you end up with paint bleeding under. It's terrible. So try to find something, canvas or board or another panel, that's the same height as what you're working on. And just position your stencil where you want it. And we're going to choose, I've chosen this 24 karat gold paint. This is the Extreme Sheen from Decor. It's my favorite metallic paint. Decor's Extreme Sheen in the 24 karat gold. This is one of the sparkliest gold paints I've ever seen. It's fabulous. So I'm going to grab a stencil brush and a little bit of gold paint. Now, I always take it off and just like this. I apply my paint in a circular fashion and I change directions frequently. And there's a reason for that. Is if you're stenciling and you go in one direction only, the paint collects on one side of the stencil, and then when it hits the breaching point, it will slide underneath the stencil. So it just makes a mess. So a little bit of gold on there. You can do this with any color really, but I really like the gold. I think it just adds a little bit of sparkle to the piece. And it's not so terribly obvious, but it does create a nice little bit of glitz in the background. And it's quite subtle. It's quite pretty. So now we have 2 things to do. What I've done is I've cut out the words that are included in the pattern that you were given to download. And you're going to use your matte medium to apply this. There's a couple of little tricks when you're applying something like this. One of them is that you don't want this to be, let's trim that a little bit. Where are my scissors? They're here somewhere. So you need to trim these so that they actually fit on the piece. And I always check to see where they're going to sit. I don't just glue them in place willy-nilly. I have a plan. Believe it or not, I have a plan. So I sort of do a dry run, so to speak, and figure out where they're going to go. Now, when it comes to putting paper onto anything, paper has a tendency to buckle and then end up with ripples and all sorts of nasty business. So there's a trick to getting these to adhere well, and that is this. Put your medium on, and then immediately get that paper wet. Dip it into a glass of water or your paint water, just make sure it's clean paint water, and then immediately lay that wet paper right into the medium. And it will lay nice and flat without buckling. So we've got one in place. We'll put a little medium right here for the next one. And dip that in water. The paper's nice and wet. The other thing is that when the paper is wet, it's easy to move it around if you need to. If you put it in the wrong place and you need to move it. And then press it into place with your brush. Like so. And we have one more. And I'm going to put this right there. Oops. And let's get that one nice and wet. There we go. Now, I worked a little too fast and my ink wasn't quite dry, so it smeared a little bit. But generally, if you give it a chance to dry really well, you won't have that problem. So, we have a calm sea, never made, a skilled sailor is now in place. And before it's completely dry, I'm going to take my angled brush and a little asphaltum, and I'm going to run a little asphaltum across the bottom of my piece, of each of the letters. It just ages the paper slightly and gives it a little oomph. Like so. Now, the simple last step is just to give this a slight spatter, and I do that with one of my favorite brushes. This is just a simple hog's bristle brush and a little bit of water. And I'm going to use a little bit of titanium white, or not titanium white, I'm sorry, warm white, and just lightly spatter this like so. And then rinse it, and then I'm going to repeat that with a little bit of carbon black. I like spattering things. I find it just softens things and sort of marries them together. Easy peasy. Little spattering. And that's it. That is a calm sea. It is not a difficult piece to do. It is very simple to paint. This video is being recorded, so we'll be able to post it on my Facebook page and on my Instagram. It will also be available on my website, so that if you want to go back and review it, you certainly will be able to. The pattern is also available on my website. It is free of charge. It's a free download. You'll find that in the freebies section on the website. So, I hope you enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite things to do. I really like this mixed media concept. It's easy to do. Don't be afraid to experiment with it. Play with colors, play with technique, get your hands dirty. Don't be shy. It isn't about getting to the end result. It's about the journey there. So everything that you do in the process, you learn something from it. This is a great piece to do if you've never played with fluid acrylics or if you've never done mixed media before. It's easy. You can't really mess this up. So jump in with both feet. Go to the website at, where's my website? There it is. Okay, go to the website at tracymoreau.net. There is a section there called freebies. There are tons of simple little projects on there that you can download right from the site. And this is one of them. So please take the time, have a little bit of fun with this, ruin a few pages of watercolor paper. Nobody's going to mind, and you're going to have a great time doing it. And if you get a chance, make sure that you make a donation to your local food bank. You know, $5 or $6 worth of groceries might not mean much to you, but it can make the difference for somebody in need. So I'd really appreciate if you throw your support behind that. If you want to, by all means, go to the mothersofavela.com or .com.br and make a donation there. I know that there are families in need in Brazil that would greatly appreciate your generosity. Oops, there. We got rid of the other one. So, if you're looking for the stencils or any of the products or the pens or what have you, or even if you're just looking for some information or for some help, there is a message board on my website. Feel free to send me messages. I answer them as quickly as I possibly can, as soon as I see them. Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. This was so much fun. I'm so glad that you came to play. I'll see you again soon. Bye.